Hello and welcome to this episode of Essex by the Sea. I'm Owen, exploring the Essex coast, finding out about the amazing and interesting stories it has to offer. Don't forget, Essex by the Sea is now also available on your smart speakers. Just tell your device to play Essex by the Sea podcast. Now, Essex may have the longest coastline, but it surprisingly doesn't actually have many lighthouses. There is one, however, in Grays. The Port of London Authority has recently spent £380,000 doing it up, and leading that project has been Peter Trent, the Port of London Authority's Assistant Civil Engineer, and joins me now on the podcast. Peter, thank you.
Hello, Owen. How are you?
Not bad. Thank you very much for joining me. Now,
Not a problem.
Stoneness Lighthouse is the one that we're talking about on this episode, but it isn't a lighthouse in the traditional sense, is it? When we think, somewhere that a lighthouse keeper will be living and a big flashing light on top.
No, it's primarily there as an aid to navigation. It's unmanned. There are no talking now about the structure that was there. We think it was built around about the 1950s-ish. It's built on the Stoneness promontory on the Stoneness Point, which is dead opposite Greenhithe in St Clement's Reach on the river, and it basically is an aid to navigation, and we undertook an inspection on it, and there was works that needed doing to keep it going.
Now, I didn't appreciate that there would be a lighthouse near Grays on the Essex coast in the River Thames. You mentioned it's opposite Greenhithe there on that stretch of river. You can see it from the QE2 bridge if you were to look down to your left as you're going over the
Indeed
bridge.
you can, yeah.
And got very good eyesight. But why is it located there on that stretch of river? Just paint where exactly it is for us.
Basically, the lighthouse is located on a rock promontory, which is on the inside of a bend on Stoneness Point. The reason it's there fundamentally, I think, is because there is a risk of sort of underwater obstructions there. I mean, it's well away from the fairway or the navigation channel. The actual navigation channel is marked by two green buoys, one being the Stoneness buoy and the other being the St Clement's buoy. As long as you're outside of those two buoys and sort of towards the Kent Bank, then basically you're on the fairway and you're in the navigation channel. It's there as an aid to mariners to stop anybody running aground, fundamentally. Doing
what lighthouses do, up and down the coast all over.
Yeah, it's as you quite rightly said, it's not a manned structure. There are no fixed or statutory services running to the lighthouse. It's all the one we replaced. It actually ran off both solar power and also a wind turbine, and some rechargeable batteries, sort of oversized car batteries, for want of a better description. And it just provides a green navigation light during the hours of darkness.
Now you mentioned about the previous structure then, the lighthouse that's there now. I mean, is lighthouse the right term for it then? If it's not sort of a manned structure, I suppose a navigational aid is a better description for it.
I mean, it provides light. All we've done is we've basically taken away the old, it was cast iron or steel lattice work structure, and we've replaced it with a tubular monopile. We've kept the focal plane and the lit arc the same, so the part of the radius of the compass, if you like, that's lit is still the same. The height of the focal plane or the height of the light above the promontory and its base is still the same. All we've changed is the actual structure holding it up.
I see. So the top bar effectively is the same. It's the support underneath. So
exactly
this work then, I mean, it must have been quite a while in the planning to be able to replace this very important navigation aid.
I joined the Port of London in January 2017, and one of the first jobs I was given was to actually have a look at the lighthouse and see if it could be repainted, because every so often, to keep the things visible and clear during the daylight, they need to be clean and well kept. And we looked originally at repainting the existing structure in situ. Now, when we went over there and had a look at it and did a bit of a survey, we were a bit concerned there probably would be lead in the paint. And the overriding sort of feature of the site, if you like, it's right on the edge of a site of special scientific interest within the West Thurrock Marshes, SSSI. So what we couldn't do is we couldn't simply turn up with a blast gun and just start knocking paint off willy-nilly, because obviously you can't do that anyway, but even more so when you're in a statutorily designated site.
Yeah, I suppose that a lot of the environmental factors you needed to consider with this, because as you rightly say, you can't have flakes of old bits of paint being washed off and bits of cast iron sort of floating down the river. So was that part of the reason then to think, actually, we'll just replace the whole structure, or did it need replacing anyway once you investigated?
It needed replacing. I mean, it had about another 5 or 10 years life in it. Certainly no more than about 5 years, I think, would have been about right. we did actually think about deconstructing, I think they call it these days, which is basically taking the existing structure apart in pieces, putting it on a barge, taking it back to either Tilbury or Denton, repainting it there under controlled conditions and bringing it back and refitting it. But by the time we'd done that, we realised, well, hang on a minute, would it be just easier to replace it with a new structure that will be both well painted and also have its integrity assured for a good few years longer than the 5 or 10 years that we possibly not got out of the old structure?
Having seen the photos of the structure, it does look a bit more substantial to what you're describing was there in the past. So its long-term future is pretty much secure now.
Yeah, I mean, the paint system on it is been designed to last 15 years. Mm-hmm. The structure has been put together basically in 2 parts. You've got a base cruciform section, you've got a steel monopile tube, and then bolted to the top of that via a flange joint is the top platform, which has got the light and the toolbox, the solar panels, and the controlling regulator that basically sits on the top of the structure that controls the operation of the light.
Now, you mentioned that the old light was powered by a number of different methods, solar power, wind power as well. How's the new structure powered? Is that still by renewable energy similar to the old one?
I mean, yeah, going back to the old structure just briefly and touching on that was actually, before the days of solar and wind power, it was actually powered by gas. There was an old gas cabinet for gas cylinders on the structure that sort of powered the light originally, and then we, I think, either ourselves or Trinity House before us, converted it to renewables. But the new structure is powered purely on solar panels.
It's amazing, really, how far the technology's come on then in really a relatively short space of time, from gas-powered lights to now solar-powered lights that will basically provide enough energy for that, I guess, what is quite a powerful light to help with the navigation, because there's a straight section of river, isn't there, sort of as it goes under the QE2 bridge towards London, and it's sort of at that corner, isn't it, as you turn then out towards Tilbury and towards Tilbury Docks. I was surprised as I was researching into what this story was and also the structure, that we do still need lighthouses on the Thames, when actually most ships, I would imagine now, have got navigation technology on them that means the skippers and pilots are probably looking at a screen rather than out the window. But these sorts of navigations are still helpful then to people on the river.
Yeah, I mean, before we actually took the decision to replace the structure wholesale, our harbour masters undertook a consultation with both our own pilots and also other river users during, I think it was early 2018. And one of the options we did consider was to actually take the old lighthouse away and not replace it, because after all, you do have two, you got the 2 buoys there, and why do you need a light? The new lighthouse is there more also was replaced as a day mark and a way mark. That was a particular comment from our pilots. So they can day mark, they can see where they are, and a way mark, they can got an idea of where they've got to be at what point to turn, given various tidal and river conditions. And the overwhelming response was to retain a light of some description. And that's why we replaced the lighthouse as a result of that consultation. So I would encourage your listeners, if there is ever a Port of London consultation that goes out for any aspect of life on the river, please do respond to it, because we do listen, we do take notice of what we're told.
And I suppose actually from that consultation, as you said, it's even more useful actually during the day to be that point to say, yeah, you need to turn here, or you need to start turning when that perhaps lines up with a certain other marker somewhere else on the river. Hadn't really considered that. I was thinking lighthouse just being useful at night.
It is exactly that. The actual body and mass of the structure sort of gives a good indicator, I think, for certainly for our pilots and probably other skippers and masters of various craft, that they know where they are and they know when to start turning or when to start moving.
Yeah, brilliant. You mentioned you joined the Port of London Authority back 2017, I think you said.
I did, yeah.
Have you just been focusing on this particular project, or is there sort of multiple projects that run alongside to keep your days and weeks busy?
We tend to get involved in various projects in the civil engineering department. We assist other departments in getting bits and pieces done. So where you see a lot of our vessels on the river, they're run by our Marine Services department out of Denton Wharf, Harbour Master or the Marine River Inspectors. They certainly in the Middle District, Lower District here rather, they run from Royal Terrace Pier. They're run by they're part of the Chief Harbour Master's department. And we've also got a pilot cutter that works 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, boarding and landing staff onto the various vessels that come up and down the river. So we have, as a department, input with a lot of those other departments, if you like, as a sort of cross relationship. So where we know a bit about building and construction, if there's works like a lighthouse, I mean, recently personally speaking, I've done a floor in a maintenance shed for marine services. There's other colleagues get involved with timber work on causeways and various other areas, replacing markers. Divers Shoals, quite a well-known area locally, and one of our colleagues deals with replacing those markers. There's radar, the radar network for the river. We get involved with inspecting, maintaining, and implementing towers. You might see across the river a bit over at the Lafarge, the old Blue Circle Works. Lafarge Blue Circle Works is I think it was 2 years ago now. We completed a new radar tower there. So we sort of get involved and have input into a lot of these larger projects, as well as sort of smaller stuff. Anything really from sort of changing or arranging for someone to repair a leaking tap or a toilet to sort of upgrading and repainting or maintaining Richmond Lock and Weir.
It must be such a varied role, particularly your role, but certainly working for the Port of London Authority, because it has such a wide remit, and I hadn't really appreciated kind of what goes on behind the scenes. If perhaps you're taking a stroll along the Essex coast, maybe sort of along the seawall at Tilbury or Grays, and you sort of look out, you see a fairly calm, most days, gentle river, but actually all the things that are going on behind, all the maintenance of the marker buoys, the lighthouses, the radar towers, as you mentioned, and all the other slipways and causeways and piers, I guess, that the Port of London Authority has responsibility over, and also the safe navigation of those ships, as you say, with the pilots going out. It must be a very varied role that you do.
I mean, sometimes you can come into work and you can think, I'm going to get on with jobs A, B, and C today, and then you end up doing D, E, and F.
Yep.
The other thing as well to bear in mind is the Port of London Authority is primarily in place to actually ensure the navigational safety of vessels using the river. So everything we do is geared towards that, be it rubbish removal, be it maintaining lights and markers. I mean, we have a dedicated technician that goes around maintaining buoy lights and navigation marks and navigation lights all the way from the estuary right up to Teddington. Again, the Marine River Inspectors, they undertake regular nighttime light checks as well to make sure everything's functioning, and then if anything isn't, then it then goes back to Lights Tech, who goes out and attends to the fault if it's needed, or it could be something as simple as changing a battery. You're right, you don't see everything that the Port of London has to undertake, and a lot of it is underpinned, of course, by the 1968 Act. Yeah,
and it must be very varied as well, in the sense of you have your pilots going out and meeting the very large sort of container ships and other vessels that perhaps on their approaches to the River Thames. So there's quite a way out to sea, and yet Teddington Lock and through the City of London, of course, it's more a very small confined river and a very sort of small place. Although
there's many different facets to the Thames indeed. I mean, you get above, I'd say, sort of Putney Bridge and up towards sort of like the more recreational end of the river, if you like, all the rowing, the windsurfing, and kayaking, all that sort of water sports takes place. Through the centre, it's very, as you know yourself, it's very commercialised, and then it's sort of commercialised, but with far bigger vessels, sort of in the lower reaches of the river down to the estuary. So it's certainly a very, very varied place to work.
Now, what's the next project? Now this one's completed, what's the next one on the list for you, Peter?
The next one on the list for me at the moment is nothing more exciting than putting in a concrete slab for some air conditioning units that are being replaced in one of our buildings.
And then that just shows the variety from lighthouses to concrete slabs. Well,
indeed.
Peter, thank you ever so much for joining us and tell us a bit about the Stoneness Lighthouse near Grays. Appreciate you taking the time to have a chat. I won't hold you up any longer, but thank you very much for joining me here on Essex by the Sea.
No worries. A pleasure, Owen. Thank you very much indeed.
Don't forget, you can follow Essex by the Sea on social media. You can now listen as well in even more places. Just ask Alexa to play Essex by the Sea and follow us Twitter, Facebook and Instagram. Until next time, thanks very much for listening.